flat Earth model in his book Zetetic Earth Not a Globe. Using biblical references, selective observation, and a distrust of established science, Rowbotham claimed that the Earth was a flat, stationary disk centered at the North Pole and surrounded by a wall of ice. This, he said, was not a theory. It was the true shape of our world, and it had been covered up by institutions seeking control. His movement gained traction, particularly among those disillusioned by scientific elites or religious institutions that had shifted away from literal interpretations of Scripture. The Universal Zetetic Society was born, preaching the flat Earth gospel into the early 20th century before fading into obscurity. But in the 21st century, the internet changed everything. Flat Earth wasn't a fringe belief anymore. It was a movement. And with YouTube videos, it exploded into Reddit threads and Facebook groups and soon organized international conferences. Followers weren't just questioning gravity or the moon landings. They were questioning everything. Photography, physics, space travel, even time itself. And for them, the answers were as clear as the horizon. The Earth is flat. We've been lied to. And someone somewhere doesn't want us to know the truth. In the modern flat Earth movement, certain names stand out, not necessarily as scientists or theologians, but as figures who reshaped the conversation, gave it structure, and brought it into the spotlight of the digital age. These individuals didn't invent the idea, but they gave it momentum, charisma, and most importantly, a platform. One of the most recognizable is Mark Sargent. A former software analyst, Sargent rose to prominence in the mid-2010s with a video series titled Flat Earth Clues. These videos, narrated in a calm, inquisitive tone, presented viewers with questions rather than declarations. Why do plane routes in the southern hemisphere often look strange? Why can we see distant city skylines across large bodies of water? Why does the horizon never curve? Sargent positioned himself not as a preacher of truth, but as someone encouraging people to just ask questions. That rhetorical tactic worked. His videos spread rapidly. Then came Eric Dubay, a more combative figure within the flat Earth landscape. Dubay wrote The Flat Earth Conspiracy, a book that linked the spherical Earth model to Freemasonry, NASA, and a grand deception orchestrated over centuries. His tone was sharper, his assertions more direct. Dubay didn't just believe the Earth was flat. He believed it had been flat all along, and that governments had systematically buried the truth to exert control. His work drew in those looking for a harder edge, a more confrontational worldview. These figures were soon joined by others, YouTubers, live streamers, podcast hosts. What made this wave different from earlier iterations was the use of modern tools, drones, high-zoom cameras, homemade experiments. Flat earthers started launching weather balloons with GoPros, filming across lakes, debating physicists online. They held conferences in the US, UK, and Canada, drawing hundreds of attendees from around the world. It wasn't just personalities driving this resurgence, it was technology. The rise of algorithm-driven platforms rewarded controversial content. Once a viewer clicked on a flat Earth video, they were often recommended dozens more. What began as a curiosity could quickly spiral into a worldview. Mainstream appearances further cemented the theory's visibility. Flat Earthers began appearing on television and in documentaries, notably the 2018 Netflix film Behind the Curve, which, while critical, gave a national stage to the movement's most outspoken voices. Suddenly, flat Earth wasn't just a theory. It was a topic of debate, ridicule, fascination. It was, for better or worse, everywhere. And as the movement grew, so did the division within it. Some factions splintered, arguing over map models, whether Antarctica was a wall or a ring, whether the sun and moon hovered above the Earth in circles or spiraled in patterns. But in all variations, the core remained. Earth is flat, NASA is lying, and the truth has been hidden from us. For those leading the charge, it's not just a theory, it's a mission, a revolution. And the more the world laughs, they argue, the more it proves they're onto something big. At the heart of the flat Earth theory lies a set of core claims, arguments that followers believe challenge the legitimacy of the globe model and point toward a vast, ongoing deception. These claims aren't buried in obscure texts or coded metaphors. They're framed as direct, observable experiences, things you can supposedly see, test, and measure for yourself. For many believers, it's not about trusting experts. It's about trusting your eyes. The first and most widely cited claim is the horizon. Flat Earthers argue that if Earth were truly a sphere, the curvature should be visible from high altitudes or across large distances. Instead, they say, the horizon always rises to eye level, no matter how high you go. Whether you're standing on a beach or flying in an airplane, they claim the line dividing sky and Earth never dips or curves. It remains perfectly flat. This ties into the second claim, long-distance visibility. Followers frequently reference photographs showing distant objects, like mountains or city skylines, visible across bodies of water. In a globe model, the curvature of the Earth should theoretically obscure these structures, at least partially. Yet flat earthers point to images where entire skylines appear clearly, without any visible distortion or obstruction. Their conclusion: the Earth isn't curving, it's flat. Then there's water, another pillar of the argument. Flat Earth proponents assert that water always finds its level. Oceans, lakes, and rivers settle flat, not curved. They question how water can stick to a curved surface without spilling off. Gravity, they argue, is an insufficient or even fabricated explanation. Some go so far as to claim gravity itself is a hoax, proposing instead that objects fall due to density and buoyancy, not an invisible force pulling toward the Earth's core. Sun and moon behavior is another major focus. Flat Earth models often depict these celestial bodies as relatively small and hovering above the Earth, moving in a circular path over the plane. This model attempts to explain time zones and seasons without relying on planetary rotation or axial tilt. They cite examples where the sun appears too large at sunset or where it seems to move in strange patterns inconsistent with what mainstream science teaches. Finally, there's the Antarctic ice wall. In many flat Earth models, Antarctica isn't a continent at the bottom of the globe. It's a massive unbroken ring of ice encircling the entire flat plain. This ice wall, they say, holds the oceans in place, and access to it is tightly controlled by global powers through the Antarctic Treaty. To flat earthers, the secrecy surrounding Antarctica isn't about preservation, it's about containment. It's the edge of the world, and beyond it lies the ultimate truth. These claims form the foundation of the flat Earth movement's appeal. They rely on perceived inconsistencies in mainstream explanations and frame themselves as challenges to authority. For followers, it's not about proving the entire model correct. It's about proving that the official story doesn't hold up. And once that doubt takes root, the rest, they say, starts to unravel. To those who subscribe to the flat Earth theory, the evidence they present is not just compelling, it's conclusive. But to many outside the movement, those same claims often appear as misunderstandings, flawed logic, or deliberate misrepresentations. Still, what makes this conspiracy so enduring is the way its evidence is continuously reframed, repackaged, and adapted to new questions and criticisms. Let's begin with the most visible issue, the horizon. Flat earthers argue that the horizon remains flat and at eye level, even from high altitudes. But according to aerospace engineers and pilots, the curve is there. It's just imperceptible without the right tools or altitudes. The Earth's diameter is so massive that the curvature becomes subtle. High-altitude footage, like those taken from weather balloons or the International Space Station, often show curvature, but flat Earth proponents dismiss these as lens distortion or CGI manipulation. That dismissal leads us into a deeper part of the theory, the belief that all official space imagery is fake. NASA and other global space agencies are seen not as pioneers of exploration, but as perpetrators of the biggest fraud in human history. Flat Earthers dissect footage from spacewalks, rocket launches, and even satellite streams, looking for glitches or signs of green screens and harnesses. When confronted with high-definition Earth images, they often point out inconsistencies in cloud patterns or lighting, declaring them fabricated. Another frequently cited piece of evidence is long-distance photography. Flat Earth advocates show images of city skylines, like Chicago seen from across Lake Michigan, as proof that Earth isn't curving. But scientists argue that these images are often the result of atmospheric refraction, a phenomenon where light bends due to changes in air density. To those unfamiliar with it, it can create optical illusions, including mirages that make distant objects appear higher than they are. Flat Earthers also argue against gravity, proposing instead that density and buoyancy explain why things fall. But mainstream physics points out that without gravity, there would be no uniform direction for objects to fall. The structure of the Earth itself, including the pressure systems that allow for an atmosphere, would be impossible without a central gravitational force pulling everything toward the core. The Antarctic ice wall is perhaps the most dramatic claim. The Antarctic Treaty, which limits activity on the continent, is cited as proof that world governments are hiding something. But in reality, the treaty is designed to protect the environment and foster scientific cooperation. Dozens of research bases operate on Antarctica, many run by universities and civilian agencies. The idea that the area is patrolled and guarded to prevent people from discovering the edge of the world is not backed by any direct evidence. But for flat Earth believers, that absence is itself suspicious. To the outside world, these claims may seem debunked, but to followers of the theory, every challenge only strengthens their resolve. They believe their evidence stands not just in opposition to science, but as a correction to it. And that belief, even in the face of contradiction, is what keeps the theory alive. Flat Earth theory has no shortage of critics. Scientists, educators, journalists, and even former conspiracy theorists have stepped forward to challenge its claims, often with detailed counter-evidence and real-world data. But despite efforts to debunk it, the theory persists, raising an important question: why? Skeptics point first to the overwhelming body of scientific knowledge accumulated over centuries. From Newton's laws to Einstein's theory of relativity, from GPS technology to satellite communications, modern life is built upon the assumption of a globe Earth. We launch satellites that rely on orbital mechanics. We fly planes across hemispheres using curvature-based navigation systems. If the Earth were flat, critics argue, these systems would fail catastrophically. But they don't. One of the most common rebuttals involves plane travel. Pilots, air traffic controllers, and flight path analysts have pointed out that long-haul routes are only logical on a globe. The infamous Flat Earth Challenge, why flights from southern continents to other southern locations sometimes route through the north, is explained by airline logistics, hub locations, fuel economy, and safety. Yet flat earthers continue to claim these routes don't make sense unless you assume a flat map. Then there's the issue of the moon and stars. Astronomers can predict eclipses, moon phases, and planetary alignments down to the second. Predictions based on a spherical Earth orbiting the sun. The southern night sky is another sticking point. On a globe, observers in Australia, South Africa, and South America all see similar southern stars rotating around a point near the South Pole. On a flat Earth model, with the southern hemisphere spread out across the edges, this shared perspective becomes nearly impossible to explain. Experts also point to the consistency of satellite data. Thousands of satellites orbit the Earth, providing GPS, weather tracking, internet, and surveillance. Engineers, programmers, and scientists interact with this technology daily. If Earth weren't spherical, the equations that make this possible would fail. Yet they don't. Flat Earth theorists often dismiss satellites altogether, calling them fake or balloons, but this requires assuming an impossibly vast and coordinated deception across every space agency and private tech firm in the world. Another layer of skepticism focuses on the psychology behind the theory. Dunning-Kruger effect, cognitive dissonance, and community reinforcement are often cited as explanations. In short, critics argue that once someone begins to question the mainstream, confirmation bias kicks in. Flat Earth content, once consumed, leads to more of the same, building an echo chamber that feels increasingly convincing. Combine that with distrust in authority, and it becomes easy to discard evidence, even overwhelming evidence, in favor of a simpler, emotionally satisfying narrative. Despite all this, the most effective counter to the theory isn't always scientific. It's personal experience. Sailors navigating the globe, astronauts returning from orbit, scientists conducting field tests. But when presented to a hardened flat earther, these accounts are often dismissed as lies or propaganda. Because at the center of the theory isn't just doubt in science, it's a belief that the entire system is corrupted. And when that belief takes root, no amount of evidence, no matter how thorough, is enough to change a mind. The flat Earth theory may seem, at first glance, to be just about geography, a wild take on the planet's shape. But beneath the surface, it taps into something far more significant, a deep and growing distrust in institutions, expertise, and narrative. This isn't science. It's a rebellion against the systems that define truth in modern society. For many who embrace the theory, the journey doesn't start with questioning the globe. It starts with questioning authority. Flat earthers often describe their awakening as a moment of disillusionment, when they stopped believing what they were told and started thinking for themselves. It's a powerful psychological shift, one that transforms not only how they see the world, but who they trust to describe it. In this context, the flat earth theory becomes a form of protest. It's a middle finger to governments, space agencies, education systems, and media organizations. It's a rejection of experts who seem distant, condescending, or politically compromised. It's a declaration that your own senses are more reliable than institutions funded by unseen hands. This mindset isn't unique to flat earthers. It parallels broader societal movements, anti-vaccine activism, climate change denial, sovereign citizen ideologies. In each, there's a common thread, the belief that powerful forces are hiding the truth for their own gain, and that the average person has been systematically lied to. The internet plays a key role in shaping these beliefs. Social media algorithms prioritize engagement, and few things engage faster than controversy. Once someone watches one flat earth video, they're often fed a steady stream of similar content, each more provocative than the last. It's not long before curiosity hardens into conviction, and in tightly knit online communities, these ideas are reinforced, not challenged. Psychologically, the theory offers something attractive: simplicity. The globe model is complex. It involves gravity, rotation, tilt, orbit, and a universe that stretches beyond comprehension. The flat Earth model, by contrast, is intuitively simple. The Earth is flat, the sky is a dome, the sun and moon circle overhead. There's a kind of emotional comfort in that, a return to a world that feels local, knowable, and designed. For some, the theory also satisfies a spiritual need. Many flat earthers cite religious texts, particularly the Bible, as support for their beliefs. In these interpretations, the globe model contradicts scripture and places humanity in a meaningless cosmic accident. The flat Earth, on the other hand, positions Earth as central, purposeful, and divinely created. Ultimately, flat Earth theory is as much about meaning as it is about maps. It gives people a way to reclaim control in a world that often feels chaotic, impersonal, and manipulated. It says, you're not insignificant. The world is not random, and you've been chosen to see the truth. Whether one agrees or not, it's clear that the flat earth theory speaks to something real, the deep hunger for truth, for certainty, and for belonging in a fractured modern world. As the flat earth movement grew from obscurity to global attention, its impact rippled far beyond its core believers. It became more than a fringe conspiracy. It became a cultural symbol, a litmus test, a viral meme. And in doing so, it revealed uncomfortable truths about how we process information, how we trust authority, and how the media both challenges and reinforces belief. In newsrooms and academic institutions, the reaction to flat earth was mostly laughter. Journalists covered flat earth conventions with bemused curiosity. Scientists wrote op-eds explaining why the theory had no basis in physics or geometry. Late-night comedians made it the punchline of monologues. But that mockery often backfired. For many in the movement, it wasn't ridicule, it was validation. Proof that the establishment was afraid, dismissive, and unwilling to engage. And in some ways, the media needed the flat earth theory too. It was clickable, watchable, comment-worthy. Videos exposing flat earth claims racked up millions of views. Documentaries were made, debates were filmed. The movement was easy to criticize but hard to ignore. It became entertainment, and with that, it grew. Social media platforms played a dual role. On one hand, they enabled the spread of flat earth content at lightning speed. On the other, their efforts to suppress it only intensified belief among some followers. When flat earth videos were demonetized or deplatformed, many interpreted it not as moderation, but censorship. It reinforced the narrative. They don't want you to know the truth. Outside of media, the theory made its way into classrooms and family conversations. Teachers began encountering students who questioned the globe model. Some parents asked schools to teach the controversy, much like earlier fights over evolution or climate change. What started as a fringe idea was now shaping real-world behavior, dividing families, straining friendships, and creating echo chambers that felt to believers like lifelines of truth. Even celebrities couldn't resist the gravitational pull of the debate. NBA star Kyrie Irving famously questioned the shape of the Earth in the 2017 podcast, only to later apologize. Rapper B.O.B. launched a crowdfunding campaign to send satellites into space to prove the Earth's shape. Each time a public figure voiced curiosity or doubt, the theory gained momentum. Another voice, another ripple in the pond. Perhaps most importantly, flat Earth theory became a mirror, not of geography, but of belief itself. It showed how quickly information can travel, how fragile consensus can be, and how easily truth can be reshaped in a world flooded with content. It revealed that even in an age of science and satellites, what we believe often has more to do with trust, emotion, and identity than with raw data. And so, flat Earth theory endures, not just as a question about the shape of our world, but as a case study in how reality is contested, curated, and constructed in the modern age. For some, it's a warning. For others, it's a revelation. But for everyone, it's a reminder. Belief is never just about facts. It's about the stories we choose to tell ourselves and the ones we're willing to fight for. As with many enduring conspiracy theories, flat Earth has branched into even stranger, more speculative territory, where boundaries blur between science fiction, ancient mythology, and theological reinterpretation. For some followers, rejecting the globe is only the first step. What lies beyond the edge? What's really above us, and what might be hidden beneath? One of the most common fringe expansions is the idea of the firmament. Pulled from ancient texts, particularly the Old Testament, the firmament is often described as a solid dome covering the earth. In some interpretations, the sun, moon, and stars aren't massive objects millions of miles away, but small luminaries set within this dome. These models paint the universe not as a vast expanding void, but as a carefully enclosed system, possibly artificial, possibly divine. In this version, the earth is not just flat, it's designed, constructed, maintained, whether by God, an alien race, or an ancient advanced civilization, varies depending on who you ask. Some theorists liken it to a simulation, echoing the idea that we live in a kind of cosmic petri dish, a controlled environment where the truth has been locked away from us since birth. Others take it even further. A subset of flat Earth believers claim that beyond the Antarctic ice wall lies a hidden expanse of land, unmapped, undiscovered, and concealed from the public. In this view, the world we know is just one territory among many. These uncharted lands are sometimes imagined as home to ancient beings, pre-flood civilizations, or entire breakaway societies that escaped mainstream history. The idea is not just that Earth is flat, but that it's far larger than we've been led to believe. This feeds into a recurring theme among fringe thinkers, the belief that history itself is a lie. Flat Earth becomes just one thread in a wider tapestry, one that includes lost civilizations like Atlantis, suppressed technologies like free energy, and even time-altering cataclysms that reset human progress. To these thinkers, nothing in our textbooks can be trusted. Every narrative must be re-examined. There are also crossovers with UFO culture and the ancient astronaut theory. Some speculate that the firmament is not just a barrier, but a technology, a shield keeping us in or others out. This has led to interpretations of rockets and space missions not as journeys into the cosmos, but as attempts to breach this boundary. In this worldview, the space race wasn't about reaching the moon. It was about finding the edge of our. In fringe flat Earth communities, stars are often described not as burning balls of gas, but as energetic anomalies, possibly projections or electrical phenomena interacting with the dome. Videos of stars twinkling under high zoom lenses are offered as evidence that what we're seeing isn't distant matter, but something far closer and far stranger. To outsiders, these ideas may sound outlandish, but within flat Earth circles, they're not just accepted, they're explored, debated, and expanded upon daily. Because once the foundational truth is questioned, once the globe is abandoned, anything becomes possible. The world stops being mapped and starts being imagined. And for many, that is precisely the appeal. As the flat Earth theory continues to evolve, it's not just shaping how its followers see the world, it's reshaping how they see themselves. For many within the movement, rejecting the globe has become more than a belief system. It's become a full identity, one that informs their sense of purpose, their community, and their place in the universe. But what does that do to someone? How does it change their relationships, their media consumption, or even their worldview? Awakening as liberating. They feel they've pulled back the curtain, exposed the great deception, and broken free from the herd. That feeling isn't just intellectually stimulating, it's emotionally transformative. In a world that increasingly feels out of their control, they've reclaimed something personal, the right to decide what's real. That awakening also creates community. Flat Earth followers are often drawn together more than just shared belief. They're bound by the feeling of being outsiders. Online forums, conferences, and meetups allow like-minded individuals to connect across cities, countries, and continents. In these spaces, trust is built not through titles or credentials, but through passion, conviction, and curiosity. It's not unusual for members to refer to each other as truth seekers or even family. But the flip side of that connection is isolation. For many, coming out as a flat earther leads to strained or broken relationships with friends, spouses, co-workers, even parents. It becomes a dividing line. People often report being mocked, shunned, or even losing jobs after sharing their beliefs. For some, this pushes them further into the where the community offers validation and belonging that the outside world has taken away. The theory also alters how they consume information. Trust in traditional media collapses. So does trust in science, academia, and even photography. Flat earthers often speak of doing their own research, which usually means turning to user-created content, YouTube videos, Reddit posts, Telegram groups. Peer-reviewed journals and mainstream documentaries are dismissed as propaganda, while grainy balloon footage or anecdotal testimonies are treated as gospel. Over time, this reframing can bleed into other areas of life. Flat Earth belief is often a gateway to other conspiracies. Followers may begin to question vaccinations, climate change, the legitimacy of elections, or even the existence of historical events. Once the world is flat, the doors to alternative realities swing wide open. After all, if they lied about something so big, why wouldn't they lie about everything else? For some, this journey ends in complete detachment from societal norms. They stop trusting doctors. They homeschool their kids to avoid globe indoctrination. They prepare for collapse. But for others, the movement is gentler, an intellectual curiosity, a community project, a rebellion against apathy. Regardless of how far they go, one thing is clear. The flat Earth theory doesn't just change what someone believes, it changes who they are. The flat Earth theory began as a rejection of a centuries-old consensus. But what it became is something far more complex, a lens through which people reimagine reality, authority, and their place in the universe. As we close this episode, what remains is not a tidy resolution, but a haunting question. What happens when enough people stop believing in the world they were taught to trust? We've traced the arc from ancient cosmologies to digital age awakenings. We've met the modern faces of the movement, explored their arguments, their doubts, and the psychological terrain that led them here. We've watched as a fringe idea transformed into a thriving community, armed not with credentials, but with conviction. And we've seen how Flat Earth became more than a theory. It became a symbol of defiance, a stand against perceived manipulation, and for some, a rebirth of spiritual or personal clarity. We've also seen the consequences, how belief in this theory can isolate, divide, and unravel, how it has challenged educators, worried scientists, and confused parents, how it's reshaped the media landscape, turning algorithms into accelerants and skepticism into spectacle, and how, despite every attempt to discredit it, the theory continues to thrive, not because of its evidence, but because of its emotional resonance. Flat Earth is no longer just about what's true or false. It's about who decides. It taps into a primal need for certainty, belonging, and agency in a world that often feels opaque, overwhelming, and out of reach. In that way, flat Earth is a challenge to science. It's a challenge to narrative itself, a refusal to accept any truth that wasn't arrived at personally through firsthand perception or trusted community. Whether you see it as dangerous misinformation or as a profound search for meaning, flat Earth is a mirror. It reflects the fractures in our information age, the fault lines between belief and knowledge, between trust and doubt. It reminds us that we're not just living in a world of facts, we're living in a world of stories. And sometimes the story we choose to believe tells us more about ourselves than about the world we're trying to understand. Thanks for listening to Conspiracy Theories Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you want to dive even deeper into the world of conspiracy theories, subscribe to Conspiracy Theories Podcast on Spotify. Thanks for your support. Subscribe now. Welcome to Conspiracy Theories Podcast. I'm your host, Noah Smith, and in today's episode, we're exploring one of the most